first thing I want to do, hopefully, is a very, very, very brief review, but we'll see. We're going to work with this today. We're going to work with a better marker, first of all. Is there a trash can in here? Obviously not. Obviously not. Much better. What are the 3 I's? Somebody help me out. There you go. Identify.
Illustrate.
Illustrate.
And interpret.
And interpret. Now, before we go any further, what are the 3 I's about? What do we use them for? Body paragraphs. Some people get confused on this point. We have a whole different template when it comes to introductions, right? This is only for body paragraphs, which, you know, is like 80% of your paper, give or take. So, pretty important. Now, I always like to point out, too, that if you remember these and it helps you, awesome. But these 3 I's, these words, don't actually matter as much as what they pertain to, which are the parts of a body paragraph. What are those? Very first sentence of a body paragraph should be what? Should do what? What happened? Introduces your argument, sums up the paragraph, right? The main idea, which hopefully is an argument. You remember what that sentence is called? It's kind of like the thesis of your body paragraph. But, no, that's an introduction. I appreciate you playing along. You're hurting me a little bit.
My apologies.
It's all good. Topic sentence is what you'll often hear it referred to as. And again, think about however you want to, but it needs to sum up your body paragraph, and hopefully your body paragraph is making an argument, which means this sentence needs to make an argument. Okay? Sometimes you will hear them referred to actually as a mini thesis because, like we just said, this works like a thesis for the paragraph we're about to read. Okay? It's almost like a backwards version of an introduction, you know? Because your thesis comes at the end of that. The thesis for this paragraph is going to come at the very beginning. All right. Next part. And the way I teach it, what you should start with when it comes to a body paragraph. You don't have this, you don't have an argument. That's an introduction. We'll get this out of the way. Introduction is hook, if you want one, introduce the text, roadmap of your argument, and then a thesis. That's your introduction. We're not worrying about those today, though. Body paragraph should start with a topic sentence. What comes after that?
Evidence after each.
Evidence. Good. Something specific from the text. Last unit, most of what we looked at was quoted material, right? Quotations, because we were reading a book. Now, of course, there were pictures, there were graphs, there were other things that I'm getting through your papers now. Some of you talked about that. That stuff is fair game. It's in the book. Can't really quote that stuff, so you have to describe it, but it's still specific, right? This time around, you can still quote the text, because there's plenty of yapping in it, but again, like we talked about last time, it's a visual medium, it is a movie, so different things happen. There's music, there's cartoons, there's all kinds of little things that you may not quote, right? You would have to describe for me. But it's still specific evidence that you can point to. Last bit. What do you do with that evidence? Huh? Kind of. I'm a little worried about that verb because that is actually what some of you do, and that's not actually what we want to do.
Well, just relate them.
Huh?
Relate the evidence to what you're trying to explain.
Kind of. You want to explain to me how this evidence proves this idea, right? And again, the way we sum that up, there's different ways to talk about it. This is your analysis. I quibble with elaborate because, again, I think some of you, and again, I'm getting through your papers right now, so if you think what I'm about to tell you doesn't apply directly to what some of you think this class is, you're wrong. Some of you are under the misconception that you just need to explain to me what this means. I know what this means, because I can read too, right? Again, most of you don't get here early. You missed my 5-year-old in here today. He would need you to explain it because he can't really read very well. So that would do him some good. Here, you explain to me what this means theoretically, what this means in terms of your argument. So what's on the page, everyone can see. You're helping me understand what's not literally on the page, right? This comes from here. That's your analysis. You explain to me how this proves this. That's every body paragraph, every single time. Last point I want to make to you, again, the way we talk about it and the way I explain it to you guys every time we look at body paragraphs, very rarely do you build them this way, right? You usually start with evidence. You just kind of fumble your way through some analysis. You kind of figure out what you think about it, okay? And then after you do that, then you can step back and say, oh, I was trying to say this, whatever it was, then you can write your topic sentence, right? That tends to be how it works. Questions about any of that? It's going to be important today. Okay. What we're going to do now, wait, a couple people come in. Darius came in? Yes? Did anybody else come in? Just Darius? Sweet. All right. What we're going to do now, if you would please, open up your email through whatever device you would like. Most of you, that'll be your phone. Some of you have laptops in front of you. Your Weska, I sent you an email right at the start of class, so like right at 9:30. Should be a link in there that gets you to a shared blank document.
Can you share it with me too?
Ah, hell. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry.
You're good.
It is hard on days I have the boy. Oh, goodness. Let's forward this to Grace real quick. All right, I just sent it to you.
Thank you.
Now, we're going to need this in a minute. We're going to have to do some work before we use it, though. I just wanted to get over this technological hurdle. How many people do we have? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. An even number, although the room is crazy. Okay, here's what we can do. I think this can kind of work. This is the best we can do in the current climate. You'll understand what I mean here in a second. Given the geography of the room and the fact that we still need to stay spread out, right? We're going to have 3 groups today. We're going to do a little bit of group work. You will have to, I expect, speak to one another in like an elevated whisper, right? You're not going to have to shout at each other. You're not that far apart. You may have to talk to each other in a normal volume. I know that's wild, but I think you guys can do it, okay? Here's what we're going to do. Your homework, albeit apparently a few people were confused about it, your homework was to look through the film, maybe even watch it again, parts of it. I assume no one went home and watched the whole thing again. Watch the documentary and pull out 3 signs or elements, 3 specific things from the documentary that seemed, for some reason, significant or interesting, right? Those 3 things are your shots, your attempts at evidence, right? You can use those for what we're about to do. You do not have to limit yourself to those, though. If you think it's something else, or maybe talking to your group, what they come up with, you guys are just exchanging ideas, you kind of have this realization, oh, I didn't do a great job on my homework. That happens. Okay. So maybe you throw yours out. That's fine. Maybe you think of something else. I don't care, right? The point of this exercise is the best you individually and also the best you as a group can come up with for evidence. That's going to be step 1. You're just going to talk to each other. Hey, what's something cool you remember from the documentary? What about the music in this one scene? This guy says a thing. What about when the family in the dramatization portion does this? Any of that stuff, okay? You guys are going to share that as a group. It'd probably be a good idea to have somebody taking notes. If I'm being real with you, I think all of you should take notes, but I say that every time and it doesn't happen. So anyway, write down that evidence. It'll be step one. Okay? Then as a group, you can kind of step back and identify one or two, you know, like your best of. Hey, I think we got something to say about this. Or hey, what about this thing? You know, you made a good point. Let's talk about that for a minute. As a group, you can bounce ideas off each other, right? Write that stuff down. That's your analysis. Okay? Doesn't have to be complete sentences. We're not getting too crazy here today. Just take some notes, right? After you do that, this is the part I want you, as a group, to put into the document, okay? Sum up your evidence for us. If you think it would help us, give us a little bit, again, of those notes of your analysis. But what we're after today is that topic sentence, right? To the best of your ability, as a group. This will not be on any one person, unless your group just sucks, which, hey, again, unfortunately, that does occasionally happen. And I'm sorry if that's you, okay? But if you all work together, you can all, again, try your best to come up with a topic sentence that at its heart has some kind of an argument about your evidence, right? We're critiquing the documentary, just like we started to do last time. Make enough sense? I'll recap real quick. You're doing all of this as a group, but one of you is going to need to type it into this document, okay? I want to know what your evidence is. Describe it to us. Quote a little bit if you want. Give us a few scant notes about your analysis. It doesn't have to be crazy, okay? But I want this to be a complete sentence. And ideally, it would be an argument. It would be some kind of a critique of the film. We'll see how we do. All right. Take a little bit of time to talk to each other. Yes, sir.
You have the view only not ready.
What happened?
You have the thing on view only.
What did he say?
You have it on view only, not edited.
The fun thing with technology is like I'm learning with this room is when they change things, it just makes it harder. God, what a useless. All right. I'm sure there's a quicker way, but I'm changing all of you one at a time. All right, I'll fix this. You guys go ahead and talk to each other. This will take me a minute, but this should do it. Now, what I want to start with, and I know this goes without saying, but I feel like sometimes I want to make perfectly clear, I'm not out to hurt anybody's feelings. Okay? What I mean by that is, this is the part that should go without saying. I'm better at this than you are. Like, you would hope so, right? But if I tell you something right now, it's because I want you to know this before we get to the paper. Okay? Most of you don't give a damn about this class. And I actually kind of understand that to a degree, although I do think you're kidding yourself in some important ways. That's a different conversation. But all of you, again, to differing degrees, care about your grade, care about the paper. So what I'm about to tell you is super important, and for no other reason than that, okay? Now, I'm gonna give us a little bit of space, just so we can kind of look at these on their own. We're just gonna go down the list, okay? So first group, topic sentence. Everything you see on the internet is not true. The evidence they're pointing us to, he went to a protest and got arrested. So this is the brother. Do we get his name? I don't remember. Do we get his name? I feel like we do.
We do get his name, but I don't
Remember what it is. I should know that. I don't remember his name. I just know I don't like him. Like of all the characters in the movie, I'm like, I was glad when he got arrested. Like, yeah, he's an idiot. I'm glad he's arrested. Anyway, he was brainwashed. That's part of their evidence, their note for their analysis. It was easy to believe in false information because we see it every day on social media. Okay. Now we have some things to talk about here. And just because I was looking at this stuff as you guys were writing it, that's kind of the magic of doing it like this. I can see you guys, like the gears kind of turning while you're doing this. My question, before we actually specifically consider their work, what's our goal in this assignment? What are we trying to do? With your chest, please? Eyes on the prize. I like it. I meant the paper. Like what are we here? And again, these body paragraphs should sort of try to get to that goal, right? Like that's what we're doing. So if you like, what are we trying to do in these body paragraphs? What's our job here? What kind of paper are we writing? Critique? What's a critique? What does it mean to offer a critique? Anybody know?
Analyzing the way they explain things.
What did he say? What did he say?
Fixing something.
Fixing something. Not exactly. Not even that. You're just judging. You're just judging. Right? I think some of those answers came from a place, there's a connotation these days around the word critical, which is associated with critique. You say somebody is critical, oftentimes we mean that in a negative way. Classically speaking, denotatively speaking, that's not the case. To be critical is just to investigate something critically, right? Now, a critique is half a step beyond that, which is you're going to look at this thing critically, and you're going to offer a judgment about it. How good a job are they doing in making their argument, whatever it is, right? That's our job. Now, I ask that, we're going to go back to the first example here. Our topic sentence. Everything you see on the internet is not true. This is my question. Is that an argument? I won't even make whoever answers this explain it. I'll make the rest of the class explain it. Yes or no? Is this an argument? Really thought somebody would jump at that. Like, I don't have to say anything after this.
You did.
You say it is.
Because some people out there, they think.
I agree that it's an argument. I still think there's a problem, though. And you're off the hook. You don't have to answer. I appreciate it. What's the problem with this topic sentence for this paper? We're supposed to be critiquing the documentary. What? No, that's not the problem.
It's not critiquing anything.
Sure, very good. And we can get to that place. Some people may not know how you came up with that. We can get to that place with an easier idea, actually. Whose argument is this? This is an argument. Whose argument is this? No. It's not. You can look at their notes. We're all looking at the same thing, right? How do they, the person who wrote it, how do they arrive at the idea that everything you see on the internet is not true? How did they get to that thought? What led them there?
The fact that he saw something on the internet that wouldn't make him go protest.
The brother. So something in the documentary got him there. Whose argument is that? Mm-mm. It's the documentary's argument. Exactly. It is. I don't know if that's quite the argument in that scene. I mean, it's definitely associated. That's here nor there. The bigger issue here, that is the documentary's argument. Everything you see on the internet is not true. They make that argument all over the place, right? That is, I told you guys with the last paper, that is one of the traps you can fall into. I'm sorry made all kinds of arguments. This documentary is going to make all kinds of arguments. And you can trick yourself into thinking you're making an argument when you simply report on those, right? But you're not. You're summarizing, right? After watching this documentary, if you wrote me a paper on how everything on the internet is not true, you are writing me a book report, right? That is what the documentary is about. So our job is to critique, which means judge how successful the documentary is in making arguments like that, okay? So for instance, and again, I'm not necessarily sold on that's what's going on in that scene. I mean, it is associated, but let's look at what we have. They are interested in the brother goes to a protest, he gets arrested. They say he was brainwashed. He definitely is. And again, I would say, I guess we can use that as evidence because the documentary makes that argument, right? All the scenes, you see him in his room, you see him at school. The girl that he has a crush on is like, hey man, are you gonna like come hang out with us? And he's like, no, I gotta watch more videos. So it's, right? Like they're very clearly trying to say, dude, she's talking to you, right? That's our evidence, still, okay? It is an argument, but it is not ours. So it is not our argument. The analysis they have is easy to believe in false information because we see it every day on social media. Again, whose argument is that? Huh? That's the documentary. Good. We're picking up on this now. And if you want to have that, fine. Again, that could be part of your evidence. So this is our evidence. We could get more specific here, and we might, as we talk about it here for a couple minutes. But either way, all of that is evidence, because it is all directly from the documentary. What we got to figure out is how we're going to critique it. How we're going to judge how successful, how good a job, or how bad a job they do in presenting that idea. Okay? And they do give us a focus. They want to talk about the scene where the brother ends up at that, what's it called, the extreme center, which is funny to me, rally with people with protest signs, and the cops are there, and he's like, what's going on, guys? And he kind of gets involved, but not like, he kind of shows up, but he kind of, he's a little bit there on accident, it seems like to me. I don't know if that's fair. And eventually, he and his sister get arrested. They lock eyes on the ground there. I'm pretty sure what's going through the sister's mind is something like, what the hell did you get me involved in, right? That's kind of her look. And his look is more like, I don't know what I'm doing, right? And then we go to the next scene. What are we going to talk about there? What are we going to critique? Well, let's start with, what argument are they making in that scene? Do you guys think? Let's entertain this for a second. What are we talking about here?
If you believe in something on the internet too heavily, you can get in serious trouble. And it's just gotten worse and worse.
Let's talk about that some. So, you hear words thrown around like extremism, and that can manifest in all sorts of ways. But it does seem like the documentary is interested in the way that the technologies that we have, the social medias that we have, all these things can, another term you'll hear, they can radicalize people, which is a way of saying it can push people to the margins, right? They have a really fun, and I say fun in a derogatory way, they have a fun graph at one point where they show political polarization, and like in the 90s, it's like people are on opposite sides, but there's a middle that's like pretty big, and then it's moving around, and when it gets to our current, it's like everything's over here. The middle is very small, which seems to support that hypothesis, right? That some people, not all people, but some people can get pushed to either margin, either side. Yeah? Maybe. Okay. So let's get a little more specific. It's not just easy to believe in false information, but easy to believe in false information, which further polarization, right? And again, I know that term gets thrown around a lot, so much so that it doesn't mean a lot these days. What that means is, in layman's terms, is it makes people fight more. Poles are opposite sides. When more people are pushed to opposite sides, they disagree more often, right? That's what we're saying. And if you have ever been on the internet, I think most of us would agree, It's a lot of screaming. Just a lot of screaming at each other. I once remarked to my wife, the internet is screaming and pornography. That's all it is. Just an ocean of that. I think I'm right. Anyway. Okay. So still, that is our evidence. What kind of job do they do here in this scene that we're looking at? We'll keep it simple. Do they do a good job? Do they do a bad job? What do you guys think? You say a good job. Why?
Because you can relate to it because it happens on the everyday, but not every day, but most times.
What does? What is it there?
People see stuff
What kind of stuff?
like different protests and stuff. They
Okay.
have different views.
So, the beginning of your critique might be, and again, we're drafting in real time, right? We're just figuring this out. The beginning of your critique would be the scene itself. The fact that this kid ends up at this political protest, right? We do see it all the time. Not necessarily with our own eyes, but on the news or online. It does seem to be happening all over the place. So they have, maybe a word you're looking for is, it's topical, right? It's current. It's a real thing that, again, we may not deal with ourselves, but we see it all the time. It's believable. Is that fair? Because I don't want to put words in your. Okay. So the beginning of our analysis would actually be okay. It seems like that's the beginning of a positive critique. Why? Let's begin some analysis. Darius, yes? All right. I'm gonna mess up and screw up somebody's name at some point, and I apologize. But Darius intimated that that's a positive critique. Why? Why is that a good thing? That this scene, the way it's set up, seems believable, realistic, something we can, as you say, relate to. Why can we relate to it? Let's talk about that.
Because he got it from his phone.
You guys say it with your chest, man.
Because he got it from his phone.
The brother.
Yeah.
What's that's a little added thing. Why does that make it better? Like,
Because he was listening to news on his phone.
was he listening to news? What's he looking at, by the way? This isn't quite in that scene, but we can bring it in for context. What's he watching all the time? It's not news.
Video,
So probably
like YouTube.
YouTube. He's watching a bunch of jackasses on YouTube. That's what he's watching. At one point, he calls it news, right? And his sister, they're on the steps in the high school, right? She's like, that's not news, dog. Like, they have that conversation. He's just like, kind of turns away. Okay. So not just the premise of the scene itself, topical and believable, which we see this thing every day. Political protests. This is the point in the presentation where I have to point out to you guys, I write like me, you write like you, okay? Engendered is just kind of a fancy verb that means these people online promote this sort of thing. That's all it means, okay? Political protests engendered by online personalities happen all the time. Yeah? Okay. Again, that's plenty of ammunition now. Darius has told us that's a positive thing. It seems like Trey's on the same wavelength. Seems like it. Why though? We have enough here. We gotta move past this. We gotta try to critique. Be wrong, by the way. I would love for anybody to try and be wrong. That's fine. This is the place to be wrong. But it seems like at least you two guys feel like this is a positive presentation of these arguments, right? Why? If someone disagrees, by the way, we could take that on. Why? I'll try to frame it in a question. We're saying that this scene, one of the primary arguments is sort of being online all the time, engaging with some of these online personalities, these folks who scream at a camera, leads to polarization, leads to, in this scene, that kid getting arrested, right? That this is something we should be careful about. I think the scene makes that argument. All I want you guys to do is tell me whether or not you think he does a good job of making that argument. I saw a nod. Okay, a couple yeses. Why? Let's feel it out as a class. Why? How? How does it do a good job then?
Because the brother is following the fake news.
What happened?
The brother is following the fake news. Or not news, but whatever on the internet, period.
What does that look like in the movie? Like you say, he's fallen to it. That's an interesting verb that I don't disagree with.
He's
Like, how does it look in the documentary? How does it happen?
Because he gets on his phone, looks through his social media, the first thing he sees is the whole rally thing. Then he follows along by going on YouTube, searching what the rally is about, what they think the rally is about, whatever. Listening to other people, and then on top of that, he then skips school and goes straight to the whole rally and sees what it's about and gets arrested.
So what you're saying then, and by the way, this is how drafting can work sometimes. What you're offering, and I'm going to ask the class if this is okay, is that we change the evidence. Your point is the progression we see this guy undertake, right? Because it starts pretty innocently, right? He gets his phone. He's not even looking at that stuff. He gets back on his phone because his ex-girlfriend is with somebody else, right? And then he's on it all night. And then the algorithm we see gives him some of these videos. He checks them out. And then from there, we see it just kind of almost like going downhill on a roller coaster, right? Is it cool if we change the evidence? Okay. You went to a protest and got arrested. Importantly, that needs another R. Thanks, Google. Importantly, it supports progression from innocent teen to mostly innocent arrestee that stands. Oops, somebody's making changes now. It's like before he gets to R's, we have to. Okay. Still, I would ask. Seems like that's a positive. The way you were presenting that was like, oh, that does a really good job of presenting the ideas we're talking about. Fine. Why? Or how? How does that make the kinds of arguments we're talking about successfully? Yeah.
Because even though that whole scene when he gets arrested, that's a super extreme situation.
Yeah.
It's still it is very prominent, even right now.
Okay.
That whole situation.
That's a little bit of a sidebar, but I'll allow it because we can start there. All right, we'll make this our analysis. I'm going to leave that stuff because we might end up using some of it, but this is kind of a new thing. Even though his actual, I'm so used to Google fixing that for me, his actual arrest, can't talk and type, I'm sorry, resonates hyperbolically. It seems a bit much, okay?
Still very possible.
It's not as if this sort of thing never happens, right? And that's kind of what you guys were saying before. Okay. My question would be, we got to get back to the evidence now. You guys are already kind of leaving it behind. can we talk about the fact, can we talk about his arrest, even maybe perhaps that it seems hyperbolic, can we talk about that in terms of the progression that we see? Does that progression help or hinder the argument that his arrest makes? Okay. Why? Or how?
Something that's simple as watching a YouTube video made him just jump to one side and immediately.
Well, now let's be, again, as specific as we can be. Does he jump immediately?
No, sir.
No. What happens? What happens? How do we describe it?
Gradual.
Good. We get to see, we use progression, right? We get to see the kind of journey he goes on, which ends up in this place that is wild, right? But importantly, we're going to argue, as part of our critique, we see the whole journey, right? Because it would be different. I'll give you an example. It would be pretty different if you see him in one scene getting on YouTube and that one guy yelling at the camera and you're like, oh man, that's like, okay. And then the next scene, you see him get arrested. That seems kind of crazy, right? We might negatively critique that because we don't see that progression. Do you see what I'm saying? Some of you are, anyway. Okay. So, further, his move to the, I believe they call it the extreme center. All right, I'm going to put this to you guys. I said it's, what we're getting at is it softens the hyperbole. What that means is, again, because some of you said this to me in some of your work I've seen. You could negatively critique that one scene where he gets arrested because it seems a bit much, right? This just kind of dumb kid, you know, ends up arrested at the end of it. It feels like an after-school special. It feels like one of those don't do drugs type things that I assume you might have seen in your life. I know I saw a bunch of them growing up. And we all kind of laughed about them. Like one of my favorite commercials growing up, these kids smoke a joint and then they accidentally kill themselves with a handgun. It's like, the message is, oh, if you do drugs, you'll blow your head. No, the message is don't play with guns. Jesus. Right? I mean, don't do it while you're high, but just don't do it. Like, that's the real message. So it's, right, that's hyperbolic. That's bananas. And the charge against this scene could be that it seems like that. It seems to be a little bit too much. We're not going to end up at a rally. Dude, come on. But we're saying it softens the hyperbole. Why is that a good thing? Why does that help them make this argument about polarization, incendiary information on the internet? Why does that help, that we soften that hyperbole? What does that do to their message? Go for it.
Because when somebody's like super extreme in their argument, you're just like, you're kind of an idiot, I don't listen to you.
Uh-huh.
But whenever they're like a little bit more moderate in their point, you understand them more, and that kind of like helps.
Why do you think that is?
Because nobody wants to listen to someone that's just sitting there screaming a bunch of crap. Like,
Why do you think that is?
I don't know.
The point where we get to where we're like, I don't know, that's what we're trying to figure out. It's not always easy, but that's the real analysis, okay? So that's one idea, that we don't, what you're kind of saying is we don't want to be talked at, right? Why not?
Yeah, it feels like somebody telling us what to do.
Okay, it feels like you're being, go ahead.
Oh, it feels like you're being controlled.
Ah, okay. So the inverse of that then, what we're kind of describing is Is it fair to say almost that it's like you're being involved in the conversation in a way more? You say yes? Okay. Well, then if we're saying that the opposite of that is to be controlled, then to be involved in the conversation is to be what? Like, what's the difference then? We're saying you're not controlled, then what's going on?
Tall, I guess.
Huh?
Being tall, you're more on the same level, I guess.
So you can participate.
Yeah.
Cool. Let's say that, right? In other words, the brother, well, I can make that its own sentence now. In other words, the brother's story and his eventual downfall, right? Again, that's kind of a fancy way of saying you're along for the ride. But again, being along for the ride is different from, look at this ride. You have no say, right? It's like, no, man, get in, let's go. You can ride shotgun, or whatever. You feel like you're part of it. That's good. I think most of the time, if somebody's making an argument and they make you feel like you're part of it, you're more inclined to listen, and perhaps even more inclined to agree or believe or whatever, right? Cool. The trick would be, because I want to at least kind of get to one of these other ones, the trick would be then that this is what we're talking about, okay? Whether or not this is where we end up, okay, because you would have more work to do, okay? But this is our argument right here. That's it. And notice, this is our argument about the text, about the arguments they're making and how they present them. I need you guys to see that. If you get nothing else out of today, that is the important thing. All of you, I watched you while you worked, gave me arguments from the documentary. That's not what we're doing, right? It's a trap. You can fall into it. Okay. The only other thing I would offer here, because I just want to point it out, it's kind of hilarious to me that he ends up in the extreme center. Because what they're talking about is like right and left politically. What I would begin to argue is, well, they can't name one of those in the documentary, because why? Like if he ends up in an extreme right rally, why can't they do that in this documentary?
He draws a lot of viewers.
Yeah. Anybody who sees themselves even a little bit on the right of the political spectrum would see that part of the documentary and be like, they're just out to, man, it's just more polarization, right? Same if it was, he ends up at an extreme left. So it has to be, you could argue, extreme center, whatever the hell that means, right? Okay. Anyway, I just want to make that point, because that is absolutely a decision they made. All right. We have very little time. Let's see what we can do. All right. So you guys wrote more of a paragraph, which I don't mind. I'm going to separate it out for us. As we watch through the documentary, an interesting yet ironic concept is argued. Okay. I'm going to stop you right there. Now, the first question is an easy one. Are we referencing the documentary in this sentence? It's an easy one. Who wants it?
Yes.
We are, because we say, yeah.
I agree.
But I think you kind of knew where I'm headed with the tone. You have the answer to my next question. Are we addressing a specific component of the documentary? Not really. Again, you could argue something about irony and whatever concept, but it's pretty vague. It's pretty vague, okay? That's my way of saying, I don't know what we're looking at in the documentary. Ideally, I would have an idea. Man, that's redundant. Hold on. In a perfect world, I would know what you're talking about when I read your topic sentence. Yeah? At least a little bit. You're going to elaborate, okay? And you guys have to be careful. Be very careful with something like irony. 9 times out of 10, you guys don't know what irony means. You're like sportscasters. Sportscasters don't know what irony is. If you ever watch a football game, you're like, ah, that's ironic. I guarantee you it's not. They're talking about coincidence. Those are two different things. They're related, but they're different. Why do I make that point? Frankly, I am glad this group has this topic sentence because it allows me to tell you guys this. Another one of the traps you guys will find yourselves in. And to be honest with you, I think you guys were trained super improperly by whoever you had before me. I'm laying this largely at the feet of your high school teachers, whoever they were. And again, God help them. I'm sure they got their own set of problems. It is not impressive to cite literary terms. It's just not. I know what those are. If you make an argument out of it, I'm here for it. But we're not doing that. We are saying, in this documentary, there's something interesting, and apparently it's somehow ironic. That's not a critique. It's kind of an argument, but even then, I don't care. Not right now. Why does it matter? Maybe it does, okay? But that's not in the topic sentence. But also be very careful with irony. You guys get yourselves into trouble. Anyway, with the last little bit of time we have, let's see what we got. All right, we're in an ever-advancing world. We use our phones. We use devices. We're under the impression we are connected. We fool ourselves. We're really in isolation. Prominent example is the scene we talked about with Isla, right? She's drifting away from her family. Oh, this is what you guys added while we were talking. You guys are sneaky. Okay. So before we get to this sentence, everything else. Whose argument is that? That's documentary. Good. Now, you probably don't have room in a body paragraph to spend that much time giving me an argument that's not yours, right? We got to figure out a way to sum this up. Let's start with what our evidence actually is, right here. All right. Whoever is writing this, by the way, watch this. Notice how we lost nothing from that sentence? One prominent example of this is when we see the family bickering while the youngest girl's on her phone. She's connected, she's just going socializing with her family. Okay. What this means now, we cut this, because we get it. Dr. Jones shows us the youngest girl screen as she looks at other people's lives while ignoring her family. Man, that is absolutely as long as your evidence can be. That's 3 good-sized sentences. I'd still like to see it trimmed. We don't have time to do that. But that is absolutely as much room as you have. Okay, we're not going to be able to type this out. We have next to no time. So what? What's our critique here? To do a good job? To do a bad job? Keep it simple. We're saying our idea is the phones, right, that offer you this world. I'm sorry, we call it an ocean of possibilities. In fact, isolates you from the real world. And we see that with Isla here. Is it doing a good job? Yes or no? What do you think? Some people nodding. Okay. Why? Or how? How so? How does it do a good job of convincing you of that argument? Does it have anything to do with Isla? Does it have anything to do with her phone? Does it have anything to do with her family, the scene? What are we going to talk about?
Because they're saying that Isla was ignored.
Isla was what? Sure. But you could just do that, right? What's that got to do with technology isolating her?
Oh, what was that? This was the scene with the family. This is, like, they were all talking about how, technology, either the sister was like technology, she doesn't need technology like a phone to do anything. The brother was talking to her back, and the kid was just walking in the kitchen, just on her device.
Yeah. Okay, so one interesting element of the scene that we've lit upon isn't just the scene itself, right? And again, this is how drafting works. You start with a general concept of your evidence. 2, And then you kind of pinpoint some things. I hadn't really considered the fact, like, what are we really saying? They're talking about her.
Yeah.
They are straight up talking about her while she's there. Does she seem to notice? What?
She doesn't care.
She doesn't care. I would say she, at least from what we see, she doesn't notice. She responds to her mother talking to her by like looking to the side, but then she looks back. So she registers her mother says something to her. From what we can tell, she doesn't even realize she's being talked about. She's in the room. That's pretty damn isolated, right? That's part of our critique. That's pointing at not just a specific thing in the document, but a very, very, very specific element of that scene. If you're in a room being talked about and you don't know, they're using your name and it's just, you're oblivious. Yeah. All right. That's all the time we have. I appreciate you guys soldiering through with me today. That's what we're trying to do in this paper. All right? Now keep in mind, we really did a lot of work with the first example. We kind of looked at the second one. That's all we got to do, right? We just didn't have the time. You guys have access to this document. So if you need to refer back to it, the work that we did, it's there for you. You just click on that link. Homework with the very, very, very little time we get. It's called opposing arguments. What I want you to try, and this can be tricky, but it's helpful for some people. First of all, you're going to have to find a specific piece of evidence, just like we did today in the documentary, and critique it, okay, to the best of your ability. The homework also asks, though, and this is a discussion board, I think. I shouldn't trust my memory. Anyway, the second part of the assignment is this. To the best of your ability, I want you to try to make the opposing critique. This may or may not be something you believe at the outset, right? We all kept saying there are positive critiques to give of these. Yeah, absolutely. One negative critique I can think of maybe with the Isla thing is she's young. She's a young kid, right? Yeah, she's isolated, but also they say she's like 11. I'm not trying to offend any preteens, but 11-year-olds are kind of just dumb. You know? Maybe a slightly negative critique you could offer is she's oblivious because of the phone, but she's also oblivious because of her age. She's just, I mean, again, I'll call my son's name, he's 5, 12 times before he answers. Is he ignoring me? Yes. Is he trying to? No. He's a samurai up here. You know what I'm saying? All morning he was trying to show me his training. That's what he's doing. He's not involved. So he's already isolated from me, right? Because I'm not doing cool stuff with swords. That might be like one kind of opposing argument, opposing critique I could get, right? We have a reason for doing this. The instructions are on course Dan. We're going to talk about it more next time, but I just want you guys to try to appreciate the argument that you have, and one way to do that is look at it from the other side. That can be hard, but it's worth it, all right? That's what we're doing for homework. I'll see you guys next week. Thank you.